Welcome to Our Hen House. This is Marianne Sullivan.
And this is Jasmine Singer.
And this week, Jasmine will be talking with Kathy Stevens, who is the executive director of Catskill Animal Sanctuary. And they are going to be talking about this hugely important topic that I didn't even know was a thing. And that is the impact of climate change on some animal sanctuaries. And in particular, of course, the very drastic changes that are taking place at Catskill, largely because of climate change.
Yeah.
Wow. What who knew?
Well, when I lived in Santa Cruz, which I lived in for like a year and a half, I guess, there was a sanctuary there that moved to upstate New York, to Western New York, and now it's here, which is Sweet Farm, which they've Nate Salvador.
No, we interviewed them.
Yeah, we interviewed them, but they were not in Santa Cruz, but they were not too far from Santa Cruz, and they moved there to New York for climate reasons. And so I guess it was like sort of on my radar, but then the New York Times came out with this huge story recently about Kathy's sanctuary and just this topic of the problem of where to find ground. And I found this interview to be very inspiring and informative, so I'm looking forward to sharing it with everybody.
All right. Well, I won't ask you a lot of questions because you probably discussed them in the interview, but I'm really intrigued. I'm wondering, like, what is it? You had one other interview with a pig sanctuary. I don't know whether they moved because of climate, but they also moved all of their animals across country.
Yeah, and I have to tell you, that was Odd Man In, by the way. I have to tell you, I do bring this up in my chat with Kathy, but like a few years ago, I moved from LA to New York in a rented RV with 4 animals. And they're all
you kind of moved your sanctuary for climate reasons.
But they're all like under 15 pounds. And it was so hard. And I was like, how do you move hundreds of animals who are absolutely...
It's inconceivable. I don't think, as far as I know, that Kathy's plans involve a move across the country. But for people who are doing that kind of thing, well, these are the kind of people who would start animal sanctuaries. So I guess they're bold.
And I won't give it away, but there is big news that she shares on the interview. So I think you're going to really like it, Marianne. I really do.
Yeah, I'm sure I will.
Yeah. So I have another exciting announcement.
They're unending.
No, I mean, they end. I can start complaining if you want. But this one is something I'm so excited about. So you all know, or if you regularly listen, you know that I host a couple of shows for the NPR station here in Rochester, New York, WXXI. And one of my shows is Environmental Connections, which airs live as a radio show. And at the same time, for the last several months, we've also been simultaneously recording it to become a TV show. So basically, the hour-long radio show gets edited down into a half-hour show, and then we further edit it so that we can add like 2 packages, which is just those little scenes in the field. And so it is finally launching, and I am so excited about it. It's like, I really love doing what I'm doing there and being able to just sneak veganism in here and there. But Marianne, like, I loved doing our TV show, the Our Hen House TV show 10 years ago now. And to have an opportunity again to get veganism on the air, but maybe this time people will watch it. Because
that would be really, kind of a plus if people actually watched it.
Yeah. So I was just,
as you were talking, do you remember that old song?
What one?
Video Killed the Radio Star? Yeah. Do you think that
Video
now that you're on TV,
killed the radio star?
Yeah.
Of course I do. I'm a child of the 80s.
Like, you're a radio star now and you're going to video, like...
Well, no, I'm also radio. I mean...
There's something going on here.
No, I don't...
It winds up with you dead.
Well, holy shit. Well, I will say, though, and I'm not following it that closely, and neither are you, so this conversation will fall flat, but the NPR is quite in the news lately, and I know public media is just really in danger. I mean, it has been for a while, and it becomes more and more in danger. And obviously, there's actually a newspaper here in Rochester, the Democrat and Chronicle, that is on strike as I speak. And the workers, among other things, are fighting for protections against AI. And I think there's already AI writing their stories.
You can be replaced.
Everyone can be replaced. You've been saying that forever.
Well, I think it would be fine if everybody did get replaced. Well, not for everything, but if everybody got replaced for all of the stupid jobs, as long as we got universal basic income, that's my plan.
Okay.
Everybody gets an income. Nobody has to do stupid jobs anymore, and everybody just does the kind of work that fulfills them, and does caretaking of those who need to be helped. That's my plan for the future. Put me in charge. Just put me in charge.
Put me in, coach. Okay, you want to know something really funny that you don't know about me?
I'm ready
this story. So once again, that song, it goes deep for me. But until I was like 25, I thought that the song was about being put in the coach section of an airplane. Because you don't hear the comma, right? Like, put me in, coach, would be easier. I don't know.
In the name of God, would anybody write a song about being? I mean, maybe put me in first.
It was the A's, and everything was crazy. I mean, there was anyway. I know it.
I cannot believe that you have never told me that before. I kind of
forgot until recently. I think I was so embarrassed that I blocked it from myself.
I think you should continue to block it.
Okay, well, let's just erase this part of the podcast.
I'll never be able to hear that song again without laughing.
Oh my God. Well, you're welcome. Sometimes you need a good laugh. All right, Marianne, I love your brain so much. I want you to tell our listeners about your new Substack article because it's so good.
Well, thank you. Which I'm trying to keep up. We're trying to get an article out once a week. And once I'm such a classic. Like I put it off. And once I start writing, I love it. But it makes me so hard to sit down and do it.
I'm laughing about Put Me in, Coach.
Put me in, Coach. I know. I'm picturing you in the airport and saying, "Do you want us to put you in first?" And you say, "No, put me in, Coach."
I don't know how we're going to continue.
I stopped laughing. I'm talking about
Guardians of the Galaxy was the theme.
I know. It's about volume 3. If you haven't seen it, the article does have spoiler alert. But I know it came out a really long time ago. I'm a little slow on the uptake. But it's the animal rights themed one. I'm sure a lot of people saw it because of that or heard about it because of that. And it really is. It's mostly about a vivisection kind of incident. And, much of the movie is really built around that. And I thought that was kind of amazing. And it's heartbreaking. And you couldn't even watch it.
Yeah.
You and Moore tried to watch it and had to turn it off. It was too upsetting. And I also wrote something about, how in Marvel movies, well, maybe you don't because I don't think you watch Marvel movies.
I've watched some.
During
the
credits, they have these little vignettes which kind of predict the next movie. And in this one, I thought that they totally undermined the animal rights message, and I think that they did it on purpose. I think it was rising anxieties myself.
Oh.
Like I think it was just too much. They realized, okay, we went too far.
Okay,
and we need to pull it back a little bit and make it not so much about animals. Anyway, that's my opinion. So I finally sat down and wrote it, and it was fun. And maybe someday somebody will read it.
No, people are reading it. I look at the stats, and they're really good, actually. Because Substack people, they like being in that community. They opt in. We'll link to it in show notes, by the way.
Now you have to write one.
I know. I actually texted you this morning and I was like, what should I write about? And you didn't reply. So
yeah, well, you have to figure out what to write about.
It's on you. I'm going to write about how I thought Put Me in, Coach was about being on an airplane.
You should totally write about that.
No, I'm not going to ever talk about it again. Let's talk about the... All right, stop it. I'm hiding you. I don't want to look at your face because it's going to make me laugh. I'm hiding me too because I don't want to look at my face either. Let's talk about the New York Declaration on Animal Consciousness because it's stupid. Or at least it's at least a little stupid. It's basically...
Yeah, I don't think we should say mean things about it. We know some of these people.
Okay, can I take that back? It's not stupid. Okay?
Well, it's not stupid. There are just things
not
about it
stupid.
that I found like weird. All right, so it's the New York Declaration on Animal Consciousness.
Okay. And so...
But it's at NYU.
All right, yeah, I feel really bad that I called it stupid. I'm sorry. I know that some of our listeners are probably involved with it, and they don't like me right now, and they're going to make fun of my Put Me in, Coach.
Yeah, it's not stupid.
It's
just
not.
that I had certain questions about it, It's very brief. It, basically says there's strong scientific support for attributions of conscious experience to other mammals and birds. And then it goes on to say realistic possibility of conscious experience in all vertebrates, many invertebrates, including insects. And then it says when there's a realistic possibility of conscious experience, we shouldn't ignore that in decisions affecting the animals. I mean, that's amazing. That's great. I think it's different from the Cambridge Declaration, which was about, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago or so. And I think it went further, to extending it to more animals, particularly invertebrates and, such as and insects. This isn't about this declaration. It's about this whole question, which I've just brought up before, I think of the so much focus on insect and other animals, but it says decapod crustaceans, cephalopod mollusks, but mostly, I'm talking about insects mostly because I'm talking about the average person's reaction to this. And it's only being signed by academics. I don't think other people are even invited to sign it. So it's not like they're asking for anybody to sign on, but I feel like when we're saying things like, basically this boils down to cows are conscious, pigs are conscious, insects are possibly, well, not even realistically possibly conscious, and we should take that into account. How are people going to take that? I mean, that's, if it's the truth, it's the truth, and you don't want to hide it, but, we are emphasizing it now.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I just feel like most people would say, well, like, we can't worry about any of it because obviously, and like, this is ridiculous. If everybody's conscious, then it doesn't matter whether anybody's conscious. That's one of my worries about it. But I guess maybe that's not true. And other people have told me, people who work in this area have said, it actually doesn't play like that. A lot of people like actually take insects consciousness seriously, not so much in like, we should never hurt insects, but we should take it into account in what we're doing to them.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I guess that's true. But the other thing is the consciousness of a mosquito or whatever, and maybe we're talking more about crickets. I don't know. Do we think it's the same as the consciousness of a pig or cow? I mean, do we? Like, I don't see how we possibly could because we don't know enough about it. And it seems very unlikely that their experience of the world is either the same as or is complex. So what do we do with that information? This starts to get complicated and I think it makes the whole thing just sound stupid to a lot of people. That's my concern.
Well, and that wasn't what I meant when I called it stupid. I feel like there's a lot of kind of squinting our eyes and backbending here to basically avoid the sentient elephant in the room.
Which is the sentient elephant.
Exactly. The sentient elephant is the sentient elephant. And I guess that's why I said it was stupid.
Well, I mean, these are people who care about the sentient elephant.
I get that. And I would have signed this too if I were in a position to. And it made me think of Peter Singer and how he's been talking about oysters forever.
I mean, he uses the word sentient instead of conscious, which, I find it difficult to understand what the difference is between those two words. And I think his position was that the evidence showed that oysters aren't sentient or conscious. I mean, just aren't. Not that they probably are. And that's a different question. Like, if you think they're not, but how do you know anyway? I don't know. Like, I find the whole thing troubling.
No,
like,
exactly.
In a world that cannot seem to pay attention to the consciousness of cows and pigs.
That's what I was going to say, is that I don't think that, as far as I know, and you know much more than I do about this, but as far as I remember, Peter felt like they probably weren't. And you have always said, why don't we err on the side that they might be? To me, that's a big fucking difference.
I don't remember specifically what he said. I think it matters that some animals might be more conscious than others. And if there's a possibility, I think we should, still err on the side of caution if we can.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess my bigger problem is more like the whole thing seems to disappear into this like miasma of, well, everybody's conscious, so probably let's not think about that at all.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, we obviously can't fix this.
Right.
I mean, life on Earth is apparently a nightmare. All we do is like harm conscious beings. That's what we're here for. So, but that's not true. I mean, like if you're just thinking of like what we do to cows. And I know none of these people are saying, like, totally and completely, these people are coming from a really good place. And, as I said in the beginning, the truth is the truth. And if this is the truth, then we have to deal with it. I don't know what. Like, I actually don't know what my conclusion is here, but the whole thing kind of freaks me out.
I know. I feel the same way.
I think most people would use this as an excuse not to care about anybody. And that's not these scientists' fault.
I agree.
They're just, reporting the science.
Mm-hmm.
And declaring it.
Well, would we rather a world in which this declaration existed or didn't exist?
I don't have any opinion on that. I mean,
okay.
I don't think the declaration is our big problem here.
All right. Well, our guest today is definitely going to be speaking about the big problem today. The big problem here. So why don't we transition to my incredible chat with the incredible Cathy Stevens?
I would love to. Cathy Stevens is the co-founder and executive director of Catskill Animal Sanctuary and the author of Where the Blind Horse Sings and Animal Camp. She will be joining Jasmine right after this.
If you like what you're hearing, please consider taking a moment to leave us a friendly review. You can do that on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or Facebook, wherever you listen to podcasts, really, or wherever you're listening right now. Amazing reviews help our henhouse to climb the rankings so that we end up in more people's ears where we can join forces to elevate the voices of the animals and those who are working to change the world for them. So thank you so much for taking the time to leave us a friendly review. Welcome back to our henhouse, Cathy.
Jasmine, I'm so excited to see you. Can't wait for it to be in person and so excited to be with your amazing listeners on this great show.
Well, I am a big fan of yours and I miss living so close to the sanctuary and just being able to see you every now and again, but we'll make it happen. We want to talk about a very specific thing today, but for those who aren't familiar with the sanctuary, because every now and then we'll get we get new vegans who are just learning the terrain. Can you start out by telling us where you are, how long you've been there, just an overview?
Sure thing. We are in the Hudson Valley, 2 hours north of Manhattan, and we have been here since 2001. We've been on this property, this formerly very forlorn, abandoned, kind of derelict space that we created one barn, one pasture at a time, since 2003. And we take in 11 species of farmed animals and do what all good sanctuaries do, to love them to pieces and then watch them evolve into these extraordinary individual beings, and in turn watch the more outgoing of them, because they're all individuals, right? Some want to hang back, but the more outgoing among them change lives in a moment. And that's what we've been doing, along with our educational piece, which is all about food and cooking for a long time.
And there are so many individuals there, and I know this isn't the topic of what I want to focus on today, but before we get into that, tell me just about someone who has your heart right now.
One?
I know.
Yeah, I will say that somebody who has my heart particularly is a pig named Mario, who was featured indirectly in a documentary about a pig farmer who had a change of heart and decided to give up pig farming when he faced what he was doing. And his name is Bob Comus. This very lyrical film that really focuses on him, not so much on the animals, is called The Last Pig. And Bob had to find space for the animals once he changed his mind, once the pigs helped him change his mind. And he could only place 8. So he had to choose his 8 favorites. He had that Sophie's Choice moment. And Mario was his kindest pig. And Mario is love on 4 legs. And a few months ago, we noticed a limp. And very long story short, a twig had gone into his skin between his 2 rear claws, and neither us nor the vet could detect it. And so we kept treating and pulling out tiny fragments, and it didn't get better. Eventually, he had to go to Cornell and have one of these toes or claws removed, but he is bopping around. We're waiting for a prosthetic that will just give him better balance, but he's bopping around as if nothing had ever happened. And he's the most beautiful. I kissed him on his muddy nose yesterday, and he's just the most beautiful spirit. He just loves.
He sounds incredible. We interviewed Bob about that film. So for those of you listening, we will link to that episode in the show notes in case you want to see more about Mario's story. So Kathy, the reason we wanted to catch up with you is because of that recent article in the New York Times. So tell us about what's going on at the sanctuary as it relates to that article.
Well, isn't hindsight 2020? Word to the wise, word to anyone considering opening a sanctuary, do not open a sanctuary in a valley. So we did 20 years ago. We bought a piece of property that was in pretty tough shape in a valley and proceeded, as funding came in, to literally build, after the massive cleanup, to do one barn, one pasture at a time. You know, we had our challenges with wet pastures every now and then, but as rainfall has increased and as the nature of rainfall has increased, it now comes in these violent, quick bursts more frequently than it ever did. We started to experience erosion, first a little bit of erosion and then a lot of erosion, to the extent that we have lost about half of our trees, which not only provide shade for the animals and homes for birds and all kinds of critters, but also slow erosion. So that the trees from north to south, our westernmost pastures, are on bedrock, and they are rapidly turning to rock as we lose trees, and there's nothing to hold the soil in place, and the rainfall intensifies. So we're losing our trees, we're losing our pasture, and we're experiencing more barn flooding than we ever had. And you know, I got a call from a donor after that article came out, and she said, "Kathy, is this truly an emergency, like a dire, life-threatening emergency?" And I said, "No, but it will be if we don't get out of here." We've seen it. We looked back at our board notes, and I started raising the problem in 2017. And 7 years later, it's just time to move. And it's sad. And as you know, we're not the only sanctuary experiencing this. We're not the only sanctuary thinking, you know, how the heck, whether people are moving to move away from tornadoes or the threat of fire or flooding. You know, sanctuaries are moving. Some of them, like Sweet Farm, who've had on, have moved across the country to the nice little microclimate in your neck of the woods.
And by the way, I lived near the sanctuary in Northern California when they were in Northern California.
Oh, that's interesting.
But I just have a quick question. All right. So as I mentioned to you earlier, I have a show called Environmental Connections. I got my first physical piece of mail from a listener the other day, and it was 2 pages, single-spaced, tiny font, climate denier.
I knew what you were going to say.
It made me feel like I made it. Honestly, I was like, this guy took the time to write this letter. But anyway, for anyone listening to this who's hearing you describe these issues that you're going through and that other sanctuaries are going through, tell us how you know they're related to climate change.
Well, because I read the science. I mean, I just read the science. I don't read the long reports that come out of the UN periodically, but I read the summaries of the reports. And I mean, it's just a fact. It's just a fact that we have more rainfall. I was talking to our soil and water guy, a guy named Jake Wiedemeyer, who came out here every year just to help us figure out how to mitigate against flooding. And he was the one who said, look, we have more rainfall. It's just a fact. You can track increased rainfall in this region. And he's the one who also said to us, there's nothing more that you can do. So if we had one odd year, then it's one odd year. Yes, weather is variable. But if you stack year after year after year after year after year of strange weather, then how can it be anything but what the scientists have been saying it was for decades? I just don't know. we got some pushback too when the piece came out from a long-term member who just wrote the opposite of a 2-page missive. He just wrote, climate change, really? I'm out of here.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
So, I think that deep down, a lot of climate changers are probably utterly terrified and so hopeless and feel so powerless to do anything but label everybody else reactive or alarmist would be terrifying. Because if they didn't do that, then they'd have to be really frightened along with the rest of us.
Okay, so speaking of the rest of us, and you mentioned that there are other sanctuaries going through this. You mentioned Sweet Farm. We also recently heard about a sanctuary in Ireland that's going through a very similar situation. And the New York Times article points out other sanctuaries in the US, including Sweet Farm, that have already moved because of climate concerns. So do you think this is going to be a growing problem for sanctuaries? And is there some reason that sanctuaries are more vulnerable to climate change than other kinds of facilities?
Yes, I think it's a growing change. No, I don't think we're more vulnerable. So to part one of the question, there have been farms whose entire cow herds have washed down the river, right? There have been pigs, massive drownings of pigs in the South and horrible floods. So I do believe this is going to be a worsening problem, as we've known for a long time. I remember it was roughly 10 years ago when the UN report came out that said we've got 10 to 12 years before calamitous change begins. And I remember the graph. It went, if this were a line, it went like this, it went like this, and then it went like this. And we're at that intersection, I believe.
For our audio listeners, flat line, and then boom up.
And then boom, way, way up. And so I think we're at that intersection of where we've been seeing gradual increase to where we start to be alarmed. And all the headlines are talking about this. So I think that absolutely, if you're on the coast and you have a sanctuary, you should be concerned. If you're in a drought-stricken area, you should be concerned. If you're in a valley, you should be concerned. The last time we looked, we identified 16 sanctuaries that had relocated. I don't remember offhand how many had relocated because of climate change, but the majority of them. Little Bear, we're great friends with Chris Vane of Little Bear Sanctuary in Florida. They had a hurricane come through. I don't remember which one it was. And their lives were threatened. They lost a couple animals and their place was destroyed.
I read the article a few times, including, again, right before we chatted. It just occurred to me that it's fresh in my mind, some of the things that are happening in the kind of bowl that your sanctuary is in. Tell our listeners a few of the things you're dealing with specifically.
Well, yeah, we are in a bowl. And so we have spent over the years hundreds of thousands of dollars to do all that we can, donor dollars, to keep our place dry and to keep water moving. We've replaced culvert pipes, just think of drainage pipes that were 6 inches in diameter with ones that are 24 inches in diameter. We've deepened the pond 2 times. We've pitched roads so that when rain comes, it moves into the ditches rather than into the opposite side, into the pastures. We've trenched through the middle of the pastures, but it has been so wet that we have several pastures that we haven't used literally in 3 years. Then that, of course, impacts everything. That impacts everything. When you can't use a pasture, you can't rotate to it. So the ones that the animals are on never have a chance to rest. So the grass doesn't become as lush as you want it to be. So, of course, we're spending more money on hay, which is already going through the roof. So there's a ripple effect with each and every concern.
So what's the plan? What do we do about it? I mean, you're saying it's not an emergency, but it's almost it sounds like an emergency to me, but I can be hyperbolic. What are we going to do, Kathy?
That's not really hyperbolic. I would say it's bordering on an emergency.
Okay.
Bordering on an emergency, because if we had another, for those in the Northeast, Irene or Sandy or Lee, we would be in serious trouble. When we had the last one, which I don't ever remember the order of them, when we had the last one, we wound up with some of our ducks and some of our goats actually in the office.
Wow.
Yeah, barns were being flooded quickly. So we're joining the sanctuaries that are moving. We're looking for a new place. We're joining the list of sanctuaries that are relocating or looking to move because we can't be here any longer.
How many animals are we talking about moving here?
Right now, we actually only have 200 because of the nature of what's going on here. We're not taking in many new rescues, which is a tough thing to do, but it's just not the responsible thing to do. So we have 200, but over 100 of them are big animals. Most of them are goats and sheep and pigs and cows and horses. So when we talk about 200, 2/3 to 3/4 of them are big animals. It's not a small thing.
No. I moved 4 animals from Los Angeles to New York, and they were all under 10 pounds, and it was nearly impossible.
A big deal.
Yeah.
Kind of a big deal.
Yeah, exactly. So where are you looking?
So we love our staff. We love this community. Ideally, we'd like to stay a stone's throw from here, but just have different geology and topography. So we're looking in a 30-mile radius. We found a few places, but somebody put in an offer before we did, or put in a higher offer, I should say. Another one was just too complicated. The situation was very complicated. There was a woman with a life tenancy and very just complicated. But we found a little place.
Can you talk about it? Like anything you can tell us? I'm very intrigued.
Here's where we are now. It is a breathtakingly beautiful place in the town of Gardner, which is about 40 minutes closer to Manhattan, which is exciting because a number of our friends are from the city. And it's just outside the town of New Paltz, which is awesome. New Paltz is a college town. It's great for partnerships. It's great because they have so many vegan restaurants or vegan-friendly restaurants. It's great for recruiting interns. It's great for collaborative partnerships with like-minded organizations. So it couldn't be a better location. It is a beautiful property with a breathtaking view of the mountains, the Shamgum as they're pronounced. They're not spelled like that, but they're pronounced Shamgum Mountains. And we're just putting one foot in front of the other. We've got 7 pieces. Our 150 acres here are made up of 7 parcels. Thank goodness, we never erased the property lines. I think I must have had some inkling that potentially we might need to move. So we didn't erase the property line. So we've got houses to sell. We've got the main campus, as we call it, to sell. Over the Ridge is a property of 32 acres. I don't remember if I ever took you over there.
I remember seeing it. Yeah.
It's a gorgeous property, beautiful rolling hills. We've got a stretch of 25 acres. I'm sitting in the homestead, which is our bed and breakfast. And that's on its own 2-acre piece. And then right across the street, there's a 25-acre piece of woods overlooking a waterfall. So it's complicated to line up the timing to sell these places, but the animals have to have somewhere to go. A. B, there is lots of built construction that needs to happen before the place is move-in ready. And then C, the biggest complication is that the Open Space Institute, that some people may be familiar with, has what's called the development rights to this property. There are nonprofits that exist to conserve open land, to promote sustainable development, and they purchase the development rights from the current owner, who then has in perpetuity this easement so that when the next person comes along to purchase it, what you can do on that property is pretty limited. So we had a meeting. The deal breaker would be if we can't build additional barns. That would be the deal breaker. There are limitations on other things like signage. We can do workarounds for all of those things. The thing we couldn't do a workaround for is animal structures. But we're really optimistic because we had a great meeting with the ED of the organization that took this development rights thing over from open space, Wallkill Valley Land Trust. And she is a pretty serious animal lover. She has volunteered here before. She remembers meeting Babe the cow and crying because he kissed her face.
Oh.
So we couldn't have a better ally.
Yeah.
So we're pretty excited. We're going to hear from them next week. And then we've got a period of due diligence and a lot of work, a lot of work, a lot of fundraising, a lot of everything to do.
To be fully transparent, there is a little bit of a gap between when we record these and when they air. So if there is new information by then, we will update our listeners at the top of the show, just so that we're clear, because...
Awesome. Okay, I'll circle back if there is. And there will be.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say. I imagine it's moving quickly. So you found this land. What does a sanctuary have to consider these days when looking for good land? Like, when you looked at that property, what was your checklist?
Top of the list, climate resilience. It's like in the time of increasing weather uncertainty, you have to have the right kind of soil. There are good soils that encourage drainage. There are bad soils that discourage drainage. This property has the best soil around. And it's actually interesting because it's in a community where there's a lot of clay soil, which is what we have here, which is terrible for drainage. So good soil, the right slope so that you're not having rain events pouring toward your animal structures. Shade, ample shade, because it's just getting harder and animals would rather stand under a tree than be stuck in a barn all day. So those are some of the biggest pieces. We look for things like, are there any existing retention ponds so that when there is flooding, is there somewhere and there is on this place. So honestly, as we go and we implement, we needed the raw canvas, and this is pretty strong in terms of a raw canvas that will allow us to implement permaculture principles and to do it in a more forward-thinking way. Now that we know what we know, and what we know is only going to get increasingly frightening with every passing year. More frightening and more challenging to address, to look for a climate resilient place and to build for climate resilience is what we'll be doing. Yeah.
And to that last point, to be honest, Kathy, one of the reasons I moved back to New York State was because of climate change and how vulnerable LA felt, which is where I was living before. So is New York State a relatively safe place? And does this situation prove that no one is actually safe?
Well, so, it's interesting because whatever you look at in general, the Northeast is considered, when you talk about regions of the country, as I'm sure you know, the Northeast is one of the safest regions. The Northeast, the Great Lakes region. So in general, I think you made a great choice. And what I've also learned about your region is that that's a really nice, very climate friendly little microclimate. In general, we haven't had the level of disaster that we've seen all around the country. It's just for us that we picked a valley. We picked a place with clay soil and are paying the price. But no, you made a good choice.
Okay, well, good. I mean, I'm not just asking for myself. You mentioned your friends in Florida at a sanctuary, and I'm immediately worried about them. Just like all of Florida, I'm worried about for so many reasons, by the way.
I don't know if you remember, you're younger than I am, but An Inconvenient Truth, Al Gore's movie, I remember watching that, and he put up at one point a graphic of the water coming in and over year after year after year. And I so clearly remember Florida disappearing.
Oh my gosh. I remember that too. I've been vegan for 20 years this year. I'm 44. I feel like everything has changed since I went vegan. I honestly, we always talk about the food. Oh my God, how much the food has exploded. But on the climate side, I remember being really close with one person in particular who was panicked about climate change. And then I met Marianne, and she was also panicked about climate change. And we were well, we have to get out of Lower Manhattan. And so we got out of Lower Manhattan. And everyone kind of thought we were crazy. And now you're seeing things like this happen. Do you think people are starting to really understand it, or do you think it's still a foreign concept?
I think it is hard to generalize. I think that Americans in particular, this is going to sound harsh, can be pretty stupid. And it has nothing to do with IQ. It has nothing to do with IQ. It has to do with the bullshit that we're fed by the media, the fact that we all live on our phones, the fact that our schools are a joke. We're not teaching critical thinking. And so I would hesitate to generalize about humanity, but it shocks the hell out of me and you, and I would venture to say all your listeners.
Yeah, for sure.
That we just act as if this is a radical notion. The fact that we are killing the earth and this poor, beautiful planet is fighting back and is going to spit us out like we're, a bad taste. Even my arch conservative father once said, we're a virus.
Oh my God.
So I don't know how to answer. I don't know how to answer the questions about humanity in general, but I just think that each of us, you said something once on a podcast and you talked about hope as a strategy, and that stays with me. And I often quote you actually about that. And I think that it is all we can do, in my view. It doesn't serve me. I am not at my best when I am thinking about people like that. I am at my best when I am speaking from a place of love and clarity and letting whoever receives it receive it. And sometimes it is somebody like that. Sometimes it is. Yeah. And that is amazing. But usually, Jasmine, it's the animals who can get to the people like that. Not anything I can say or do. Yeah. All I can do is take them in the field with a cow, and suddenly they're being bathed with kisses and the synapses start to fire and then they make the connections.
No, I agree with that for sure. I think your story about Mario, for example, might be one of the main things people remember about this particular chat, because it's the animals who speak the loudest, I think. And by the way, most of my good ideas originated with Marianne. So anytime anyone's quoting me, they're probably inadvertently quoting Marianne. Oh. I'm just saying she's the one that plants seeds in my brain. So let's go back to the New York Times piece. If you were to have written that piece yourself, what would you have emphasized? Would it have been exactly how it came out, or would there have been a different angle?
Oh, that's interesting. It is the New York Times. That's a great question. It is the New York Times. And the thing that was weird is that the photographer, she was following us around the whole time. And she put me in place A. And I would smile. And she'd say, don't smile.
Oh my God.
She wouldn't let me smile. And so I felt like the whole article was the written version of Don't Smile. I thought she did an exceptional job, but it was just very, very, very factual. I remember reading it very nervous, because you never know. But no, I wouldn't change anything in particular. I thought it was, for the New York Times, I thought it was factual. I thought it was thorough. I liked the fact that she brought in the science a little bit, but not too much for people to turn away. I think there could have been a few more stories about the impact on the animals, but it's the New York Times. I thought she did an amazing job.
Yeah, and the photos were beautiful. I mean, they were stunning, and I thought the article as a whole was fantastic. It's interesting to hear you say that, though, because you do have, despite yourself, you do have a joie de vivre. You do have a...
I do. Of course I do.
Well, I mean... You've seen a lot of shit, and you are still a powerful presence, and you're not like a doomster, or a doomer, I guess they call it. You're not. I mean, you don't want to generalize humanity. I do, but okay. I don't want to generalize like generations. I talk about generations way too often. I think I'm Gen X by a few years. I just made it into Gen X, but like Marianne and I talk about it because she's a boomer, and also she doesn't want to talk about it. I make her talk about it.
Yeah, I just made it into boomers. I'm a boomer by...
Oh, really? You were almost a Gen X, and I was almost not...
Gen X. Yeah.
Okay. I kind of figured you were a Gen X too. But so Marianne being a boomer, I don't know. I do see a big difference. I work with people of varying ages now, and I just sort of wonder if like younger people are hardwired to be sunnier people because they're going to be here longer. But okay, I'm getting back into doom bad stuff. So you don't have to reply to that if you don't want to.
Well, I mean, it's interesting if you find that younger people are sunnier. That is fascinating to me because I don't pay attention to generational stuff, even though my partner's son, Devin, in his 20s, is always sending me stuff to read about generational stuff. If I were in my 20s, Jasmine, and I wanted kids, I don't know that I would have them. That's a heavy thing. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like my oldest niece just had a baby, and she's not one of those people. She and her husband are very aware, and they had a baby. What kind of air is that baby going to be breathing in 20 years? Will that baby see a tree? And, I mean, we are adaptive, but I don't, as connected to the natural world as I am, I wouldn't want to live in a world without trees.
Yeah, I just did an episode of Environmental Connections about whether or not people should be having kids right now. And it's not a strongly angled show. We have people on the panel from all different perspectives, including me, someone who never had them, but who wanted them, by the way. And so like whenever I meet someone over 40 who didn't have one, they're like, oh my God, right? Like, thank God we didn't have one. I'm like, no, actually, I really felt the urge. I really felt that kind of throbbing uterus that happens to you around 40. I really wanted kids, but it was a choice I made not to have them. And it's a sacrifice that I made that I am sad about, but I'm also satisfied with. And those two things coexist. But there were also a lot of people who wanted to have them and knew what they were getting into. So we will link to that in the show notes as well for anyone who's interested in this topic. So I do have a selfish question for you, Kathy. You're in your B&B right now. I think you said you're in your B&B right now, right?
Yeah.
So are you going to continue having a B&B, asking for a friend?
So one of the things that we have to figure out with this new property, because I'm assuming it's going to happen, I'm just assuming that we're moving to Gardner, is what the restrictions are for overnight space. The language in the easement is a little ambiguous. And so if we can't have a B&B, we will have some sort of housing. They draw a distinction between permanent and impermanent structures. And so now we're saying, okay, if we can't do A, can we do glamping? Can we do, what can we do?
Do a cute little Airstream from the 1950s with like a checkered kitchen.
Or maybe some tiny houses. Like we'll see. Just have to see. I don't know how tiny houses are defined, but we're figuring that part out. We really want to offer overnight housing, overnight accommodation. 100%. Just don't know what it's going to look like.
So how do you feel? I mean, just as we close up this interview, though, I do want you to stay on and chat with our flock for a few minutes, too. How are you feeling about all this? I mean, this is 20 some odd years of your life. Are you like, bring it? Or are you sad? Like, tell me a little bit about where your heart is right now.
I am at bring it, which is interesting because a year or so ago, I was talking to the board about moving on and launching a search for my successor. And then it became apparent that this was just not the right time. You can't bringing on a successor to a 20-some year founder is kind of a big thing. And searching for and setting up a new property is kind of a big thing. So I just did a lot of reflecting, and we brought in a terrific new board, and I realize I think a lot about privilege, and there is nothing I have to complain about. I'm healthy. I have a wonderful community of friends. This is an amazing team. I am simultaneously impatient with, but excited by the change I see in the vegan space. I've learned a lot of lessons, some of them the hard way, about what not to do in terms of running a sanctuary. And so, no, I am on fire and determined to see this through and to set up this place to be as resilient as possible, to be as impactful as possible. We have an amazing brand new partnership with the Mayor's Office of Food Policy in the city, and we're in lots of classrooms bringing the animals to the kids. So no, I'm optimistic, determined, energized.
Good. I'm so happy to hear you say that. I'm not surprised to hear you say that. But I want to know, lastly, how our listeners can support your efforts.
Oh my goodness. I am so grateful to you for asking that. We have going on right now in Q2 what's called a 401 campaign. And it is designed to supplement our income, this is a slow quarter for us historically, and help us take care of escalating medical costs, because the average age of our animals is like 914, and escalating hay costs and escalating vet bills. And so they can go right online and just find the 401 campaign and contribute to that. And also follow us on social media, because we'll be doing particular announcements, updating people about the move once we're a little farther along, reminding people about 401 So any of our social media and the website, just log on and donate. And come visit. We're open for tours here on Saturdays and hope to be open for a big old welcome event sometime this year.
Oh my gosh. That's so great. Also, 401
It could be.
Like, who came up with 401 Because that person deserves a cupcake. Was it you?
Yes.
Okay, you need a cupcake. It's like adorable, but it's also so powerful. And like, it says so much. I love it so much. Oh my gosh. All right.
Can I just tell you, I might be taking the credit from somebody else. My memory is that it was me. We launched a 401 campaign a long time ago, like over 10 years ago.
Okay.
That staff that was with us back then is not here now. So there's a possibility that it was somebody else.
Well, the best ideas are stolen.
Let me amend and say I don't remember. I think it was my idea, but who cares? I don't know.
Cupcakes for everyone. Vegan cupcakes.
That's it.
Yeah. It was probably Mary Ann's idea. Let's be real.
It was.
I'm just kidding. All right. Amazing. Kathy, thank you so much for joining me today on our Hen House. Stay on the line. I want to chat with you a little further, but I adore you, and I'm so excited about this next phase.
Likewise, Jasmine Singer. Thanks, everybody. Hope to see you up here soon.
I hope you enjoyed this week's interview. Now we have something extra special for you. This month only, we've teamed up with our friends over at Scarlet Spark to bring you the Leadership Corner series to help our animal rights-minded listeners hone their skills when it comes to leading a team. Whether your team is a handful of activists getting together to organize a successful event, or maybe start an entire organization, we know you will find value in the skill presented here. So without further ado, let's get our leadership on.
Hello and welcome to the Leadership Corner by Scarlet Spark in collaboration with the one and only Our Hen House. Scarlet Spark is a nonprofit working to spark the full potential of the animal protection movement by amplifying advocates' leadership skills. I'm Tanya Luna, co-founder of Scarlet Spark, consultant, educator, psychology researcher, and leadership nerd. I'm excited to hang out with you in the Leadership Corner, whether you lead a project, a program, or an entire pro-animal organization. Throughout the past 3 episodes, we've been breaking down foundational leadership skills one by one, including question skills, clarity skills, and outward skills. These are the skills that you can combine and recombine to solve any challenge that comes your way. In this last installment of the Foundational Leadership Skills series, we're going to focus on one final capability that we call inward skills. Just like outward skills are all about noticing others' needs and adjusting our approach to suit them, inward skills are the ability to notice and understand our own needs and then make adjustments for ourselves. You can think of it as a combination of self-awareness, emotional intelligence, and self-compassion. And let me tell you, even though the people who have dedicated themselves to animals are incredibly compassionate, as you know, all too often we do not turn that compassion inward. We care about everyone else and then we neglect ourselves and work in ways that are borderline abusive, burning ourselves out and beating ourselves up. And as a result, we fail to live up to our own potential as leaders and advocates while creating a culture across the animal protection movement that makes it normal and even expected to disregard our own needs. Let's not do that. What's one way to break out of this vicious cycle? Building our inward skills. Let's start out by listening to a quick demo from my Scarlet Spark crew, Brian and Alyssa. Observe what happens when Alyssa doesn't use inward skills in this stressful exchange.
Hey, Alyssa, I'm going to need us to move that pig project up by about 2 weeks, that deadline.
2 weeks. That's kind of a quick turnaround. I mean, we're already short-staffed, right?
Yeah, totally. I completely understand that it's quick, but honestly, it's not for me. I'm not just doing it for a time crunch. It's for the animals. It's for the pigs.
I guess I could cancel my vacation to get it done.
Can you relate to this scenario? How often do you put yourself last in this way? And what is the price you end up paying for it? Also, who else might be harmed other than you? What will happen in the next few months or years if you keep treating yourself this way? For many of us, the answer is burning out to the point of losing energy for the work, or even, worst case, leaving the movement entirely as a way to protect ourselves. So, what inward skill tools can help? As usual, there are lots, but today we'll focus on 3 of them: affective labeling, pausing skills, and boundary setting. Number 1, affective labeling. This is a concept from the field of psychology that just means putting words to our feelings, to our affect. Research shows that when we can identify and articulate our internal states, it reduces the intensity of our feelings. The goal isn't to make the feelings go away. Our feelings are our friends. When we ignore them, we miss out on valuable information, and we often make suppressed emotions escalate. But when we label our feelings, we give them a voice. And when we do that, we can fully listen to what they're trying to tell us. In this way, we're able to learn from them. And like anyone who feels fully heard and respected, it allows the feelings to kind of relax and stop making such a ruckus in our bodies. Affective labeling is easier said than done. So here are some pro tips to get good at this important inward skill. If you're having a hard time figuring out what it is that you feel, start basic. Is it good or is it bad? You can even look up a list of feeling words online to expand your emotional vocabulary. Next, you can ask yourself, where do I feel it in my body? Are my shoulders tight? Is there a knot in my stomach? Another really powerful practice is spending 10 to 15 minutes just writing nonstop about what's going on for you. You can write it in the first person, like, here's what I'm feeling, or you can even experiment with writing in the third person, like, Tanya is feeling this. And finally, go beyond naming your feelings and try to identify your needs. So ask yourself, what are my feelings trying to tell me about what I need? What's missing for me? What do I wish I could have? And again, you could look up a list of needs online. It sounds silly, but so often we forget, what our own needs are. And they could range from basic, like food and water and sleep, and sometimes that's all you need, to more emotional needs like respect, friendship, or play. And you could just do this in your own head. You could write it down, or if you feel safe enough with the person you're interacting with or the people you're interacting with, you can also label out loud. So inward skill number 1 is affective labeling, but there's another skill that goes perfectly hand in hand with it. Inward skill number 2, pausing. Going back to the demo, in the moment when Brian was asking Alyssa to have a shorter turnaround time for their project, Alyssa was probably feeling this flood of different emotions. And sometimes it's possible to label our feelings and needs in the moment, but sometimes it's too overwhelming. And at times like that, the most essential skill we need is pausing. When we can step away from the situation, it gives us the space to actually name our feelings and identify our needs, then make a thoughtful decision. Here are some examples of how we can pause out loud. Thank you for bringing this to me. It's really important to me that I give you a thoughtful reply. Can I think it over today and get back to you tomorrow? Or, okay, you've given me a lot to consider. I'd like to take this next hour to think it through fully. Or, I think I can use a 10-minute break to process everything so I'm thinking clearly. Or simply, let's pause for a quick bathroom or a water break. All right, so we've talked affective labeling and pausing. Last but not least, let's move on to inward skill number 3, boundary setting. We can do an entire episode or several episodes just on this topic, but for now, let's talk about a few tools you can use to set and protect your boundaries. First, what do we even mean when we say boundaries? It can be such an overused word. I find it helpful to visualize them as these lines we draw around our internal resources. So things like our time, our energy, our values, our bodies, and the commitments we've already made to ourselves and others that we care about upholding. When we operate without boundaries, it's kind of like operating without a financial budget. So we can very quickly overdraw our accounts, go into debt, and then go into like psychological bankruptcy, otherwise known as burnout, a state of being totally depleted and no longer able to give to ourselves or to others. Many of us have learned to feel guilty about even having boundaries. But they exist so we're able to make a meaningful impact for others, and also so we can experience the joy we work so hard to achieve for animals. We are animals too. Affective labeling and pausing can help you identify what you need your boundaries to be. Next, you have to build the habit of setting and maintaining those boundaries. That's the really tough part. So here are some pro tips to do just that. First, have some boundary setting phrases in your back pocket. So for example, I'd love to, but I'm fully committed. Or I'm currently at capacity. Or I'm tempted, but I owe it to my other responsibilities not to take anything else on. You can also suggest a trade-off. So for example, I can take on X, but I'll need to postpone Y. Does that work? Or suggest other resources. So for example, my plate is full, but have you looked at this other resource? One other tip here is to have rigid boundaries, especially when you're first learning to get good at this. For some people, like me, it helps to draw an immovable line around certain things. So for example, it's much easier to never work on weekends instead of rarely work on weekends. Okay, with those 3 skills in mind, affective labeling, pausing, and boundary setting, let's listen to one more demo with Alyssa and Brian. And this time, just to practice, raise your hand every time you notice Alyssa using one of these skills.
Hey, Alyssa, I'm going to need you to move that pig project deadline up about 2 weeks.
2 weeks. Wow, it sounds like there's a lot of urgency around that. The thing is, I'm hesitating because, that's a much quicker turnaround than we had talked about. And the team's already pretty short-staffed. Lately, I've been feeling like I'm rushing a lot and I just don't think I'm doing my best work. I really feel like it'd be better if I could have that time to think things through and make sure that I'm like making the right decisions, getting good results.
No, totally. I get it. I get that it's a quick turnaround and where your concerns are, but I'm not just doing a time crunch here just to do it. It's for the pigs.
Yeah, I hear that. I really care about the pigs. I that's why I'm here, but I also think that's why it's important to do a good job on this. Thinking about my workload, if we need to get this done faster, is there anything else that can be pushed back so that I can focus on this before I go on vacation?
I'm wondering if it's possible that you can reschedule that vacation, considering the time crunch now.
So I know I need time off to recharge and do my best work, and I'd hate for my rescheduling to set a bad example for other people that they can't do that when they need it. So maybe what we should do is we can both take the day and just review all of our priorities, and then maybe we can reconnect tomorrow and identify what can be postponed so that we can make that 2-week turnaround.
Nice work, Alyssa and Brian. And you might have noticed that in this example, Alyssa was combining inward skills and outward skills together. And that's often a really nice combination where you're tending to yourself and your own needs, but you're still looking out for the other person. Okay, friends, we are nearing the end of this episode and our Foundational Leadership Skills series. But before you go, be sure to pick a skill spark to turn these inward skills into habits. Choose a situation that can serve as your spark to practice these skills. So, for example, if you notice yourself feeling stressed, then pause and write down what you're feeling. Or if someone asks you to take on more work, name your boundaries. For a list of skill spark ideas, check out the link in the show notes. And as always, if you want more free resources from Scarlet Spark like workshops, office hours, tools, and templates that will save you time and increase your impact, please go ahead and check out our website, scarletspark.org. We are so grateful for all that you do to create a better world for animals, humans included.
And anxieties are rising. Our first story is this is a bad one, I have to say. This is from a story in The Guardian. UN livestock emissions report seriously distorted our work, say experts. You can imagine how. And this has to do with a study that was released at COP28. And according to these scientists, this study by the Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN just used their research to say things that their research didn't say. A study released at COP28 misused research to underestimate impact of cutting meat eating, say academics. The words they used were that their findings were seriously distorted. This is Paul Behrens, who's an associate professor at Leiden University, and Matthew Hayek, who's an assistant professor at NYU. And they just accused the FAO of systematic errors, poor framing, highly inappropriate use of source data. Behrens, in particular, said voluminous evidence from larger environmental reports which recommended reductions in meat content were ignored. Quote, the scientific consensus at the moment is that dietary shifts are the biggest leverage we have to reduce emissions and other damage caused by our food system. But the FAO chose the roughest and most inappropriate approach to their estimates and framed it in a way that was very useful for interest groups seeking to show that plant-based diets have a small mitigation potential compared to alternatives. Wow. As if we don't have enough to be up against in promoting the idea that people should not be eating animals. I mean, just completely misusing taking these people's research, not ignoring it, but actually distorting it. Hayek said that the FAO inappropriately cited a report he co-authored that measured all agri-food emissions and applied it to livestock emissions alone. Quote, it wasn't just like comparing apples to oranges. It was like comparing really small apples to really big oranges. Just really a disgrace. But, I'm glad they were able to make something of a stink about it. I hope that these complaints get somewhere other than a Guardian article. But Guardian article ain't nothing, I guess. The fight goes on, the fight goes on. All right. Speaking of fighting, U.S. dietary guidelines, a balancing act. Now, you need to wait for this, for this headline. And then once you do, try to figure out what publication this is from. All right. U.S. dietary guidelines, a balancing act for health, policy, and the pork industry. Yeah, those are the three elements that we should be considering in considering dietary guidelines. This is, of course, from Pork Business. It would be really bad if that was from the newspaper. The article points out that the dietary guidelines aim to provide comprehensive advice on food and beverage choices, yes, to meet nutrient requirements, promote overall health, and reduce the risk of chronic diseases. Yes. They not only cater to individuals, but also inform policymakers, healthcare providers, nutrition educators, and operators. This is crucial. Operators of federal nutrition programs. If you think that nobody ever looks at the dietary guidelines, and so they're really not that important, well, a whole lot of federal agencies look at them, as this article points out. Quote, the dietary guidelines hold significant sway over various federal nutritional programs, such as the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, that's SNAP, which is, what we used to call food stamps, and the National School Lunch Program. So they're really, really significant, even if we think that nobody ever looks at them. And the pork industry knows damn well that they're very significant. And they point out that for the pork industry, the guidelines play a crucial role in shaping consumption patterns and perceptions surrounding pork products. And the National Pork Producers Council actively engages in the process. Oh, really? Is that true? That's good to know. Participating in advisory committee meetings, providing science-based feedback. Yeah, I'd like to see that science. And advocating for the recognition of pork's nutritional value. Oh, well, isn't that helpful? Thank God they're helping out. While pork is consistently, it goes on to say, been acknowledged as a high-quality protein source. Yeah, they have been sitting in at the meetings, haven't they? Efforts are underway to emphasize its affordability and cultural relevance within the American diet. Okay, all of a sudden, affordability and cultural relevance are important. However, the guidelines formulation, the article goes on to say, isn't immune to external influences. Uh-oh. apparently there are external influences other than the pork industry that are chiming in. Special interest groups, particularly those advocating against animal agriculture, have exerted pressure to diminish it's just so hilarious, to diminish the emphasis on meat consumption in favor of plant-based alternatives, doing things like defining terms like quote unquote healthy. I mean, I don't even know what to say about this. Like, it's unbelievable. Unbelievable. Apparently, the National Pork Producers Council consider themselves not an outside force, but maybe they're part of the government now. I don't know. Maybe that happened. Did we elect them? Looking ahead, the article goes on, NPPC will continue to collaborate closely with USDA officials. Well, thank God for that. Highlighting concerns and proposing recommendations to ensure that the dietary guidelines reflect scientifically sound advice while promoting a balanced approach to nutrition. Yeah, give those kids more hot dogs. Unbelievable. All right, our last story is from the UK. Countryside Alliance takes issue with vegan promotion by councils. The Countryside Alliance, it says, has called for 2 councils to retract their public support for vegan diets in a bid to support local farmers instead. This is from Agriland, a website called Agriland. All right, these 2 local councils, good for them, are Tameside Metropolitan Borough Council and Warwickshire County Council. And, it had to do with Veganuary. They were offering support for Veganuary. At least that was the Tameside one. And, just talking about switching to a plant-based diet or, plant-based foods or have health benefits and environmental benefits, blah, blah, blah. Seems like, they're doing the kind of thing that governments should do. But the Countryside Alliance, it's such a cute name, isn't it? The Countryside Alliance. They're pissed off. They don't like vegan diets. They have apparently forgotten the fact that vegetables, grains, legumes, whatever, are grown by farmers. They don't care about those farmers at all, apparently. The Countryside Alliance has spoken out against the encouragement of vegetarian vegan diets and has been leading a rural fight back in the hopes of encouraging residents and councils to show support to local farmers, apparently not including the farmers who grow vegetables. They say British farmers are part of the solution to climate change, not part of the problem. Well, yeah, but the food that vegans eat is actually grown by farmers. It is disappointing to see councils ignoring these efforts and regurgitating lazy claims. Tameside and Warwickshire councils should be using their platforms to promote local meat, dairy, and vegetable produce. Well, if they're supporting vegan diets, aren't they